225 South 152nd Street. All right, we're going to dive into it. We started the series, The Rest of the Story. The sermon last week was called Give It a Rest. This is part 2 of that sermon. Last week we talked about a number of things. I talked a little bit about my background working with athletes, where we talked about athletes are, when they're training, they're being pushed beyond their limits. But we would also tell our athletes that you're not getting stronger in the gym. You're actually getting weaker. That's when you're breaking down your muscles. That's when you're going farther than you've been before, but it actually leaves you in a weaker state than when you came in the gym. And so we tell our athletes it's actually when you're resting and sleeping that you're getting stronger. That's when the muscles are rebuilding. That's when your body's being rejuvenated. And in the same way, in a spiritual sense, God takes us through times on a daily basis or weekly basis or yearly basis where he brings us to places that are farther than we've ever been. He challenges us, he stretches us, he increases our capacity. But it's also important that we recognize the need for healthy rhythms when it comes to resting, stopping, ceasing. That Hebrew word Shabbat, to cease, to stop. If an athlete fails to have proper recovery in his training program, there are certain types of injuries that will pop up. We call them overuse injuries. Overuse injuries. And it just means that an athlete hasn't developed this proper system. They've been going so hard that they're breaking their body down over and over and over, not giving their body enough time to actually recuperate, and it leads to injury. That could also be an analogy used for our families or our kids. If we're not living a healthy lifestyle of both being stretched in what God calls us to, as well as resting and ceasing in recovery, we'll begin to see overuse injuries, so to speak, in our families, in our marriages, in our friendships, in our congregation. Things that start to pop up that the enemy tries to get a hold of that can often be given a foothold because we're going so hard without having a healthy rhythm of stretching and resting. There are some who take the stance of, well, I don't Sabbath because that's an Old Testament thing and I don't want to be legalistic. My question would be, do you also take the same approach with your marriage? Well, now that we're married, I don't want to be legalistic and have a date night with my spouse. I don't want to be legalistic about it. I'm married to my spouse every day. A Sabbath is an opportunity, a rhythm, call it, to set aside a holiday, a holy day, to him who's our beloved. I know it sounds weird to say that as a guy, but to set aside a time for that most important relationship in our life, that relationship that's more important than your spouse. I don't say that lightly. But if Jesus is first, your spouse will benefit greatly. If your spouse is first and Jesus is somewhere down the line, your spouse will suffer. If Jesus is first, your children will be blessed. Your friends will be blessed. Your church family will be blessed. Last week we talked and read passages from Exodus and Deuteronomy about the Lord giving one of the commandments being to make the Sabbath day holy. We saw that it involved not just individuals, but also references your kids, your household, your visitors, your business, even your livestock being brought into this rhythm of Sabbath. Think about that from a business sense. There are a couple big name companies that take a Sabbath. You know of Chick-fil-A or Hobby Lobby. Extraordinary that they take a day of the week and they close their doors. They give up that amount of profit or revenue that they could have made to say, hey, we're going to have a day where us and all of our employees cease and stop. You know, it's interesting. McDonald's is the biggest fast food chain in the world. But if you look at the profitability per store between McDonald's and Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A blows McDonald's out of the water. The average revenue of a Chick-fil-A store is $3 to $7 million a year. The average of a McDonald's shop is less than 3 million. You could write that off and say it's because of a number of different reasons, but I see favor. Not because we do these things in order to get something from God, but it's the way God designed us to operate as people. Chick-fil-A has said, hey, we'll give up 15% of our operating hours to be closed on one day. And yet you see that business springing forth in much favor. Last week we talked about how in Exodus it refers to God made the Sabbath day holy. After the 6 days that he worked, he set aside the seventh day and made it holy. Then in Exodus 20, we're called to keep the Sabbath day holy. He made it holy. We're called to keep it holy. He initially set it apart. We're called to continue to set it apart. What he began, what he established and modeled for us. We also read in Exodus 20, it talks about how the Sabbath is to the Lord. We keep a Sabbath to the Lord. It's to him. But Jesus refers in the book of Mark, chapter 2, that the Sabbath is for man. It's to God, but it's for man. It's to him, but we're the ones that actually benefit from it. We're the ones that are actually most blessed from it. God's not giving commandments or laws to say, hey, I'm here to kill the vibe or kill the party or whatever. He's saying, actually, if you want to experience life, true life, an abundant life, trust me. Trust me. Keep a Sabbath holy to the Lord, but it's for you. In Mark 2, Jesus also references that he's the Lord of the Sabbath. Is he the Lord of our Sabbath? Is he the Lord of our Sabbath? We reference the difference between active rest and passive rest. The difference between a Sabbath and just a day off. Passive rest would be if an athlete gets out of the gym, they've just gone further than they've been before, they've just tested their limits, and they go home, they pop open a bag of Cheetos and sit on the couch until they feel better. That's passive rest. Eventually, you would actually recover, but not nearly as well, not nearly as strong as you would have had you actually been actively engaged in your recovery. Based on what you eat, based on how you sleep, based on some of the things you can do to help take care of your body in between moments of stretching and challenge. Are our Sabbaths just another day off where we're rushing to get all the other things done? Is it just as busy as a work day with other things? Or do we know how to Sabbath well? We talked about this concept of pathological busyness. Constantly being busy, constantly rushing to the next thing, to the point that it just becomes normal and we think we just have to. But then realizing that the solution to an overbusy life is not magically being given more time. In the same way that if somebody is struggling financially or has bad financial habits and they win the lottery, the vast majority of the time they'll be right back where they were, if not worse, within 5 years of winning the lottery. The issue is not that we're just waiting to get more time in our life. The issue is that we're learning and need to learn how to steward the time we've been given. If God magically made the day 48 hours, moving forward, we would be just as busy. That's just the reality. So we're learning to steward time. We're learning to steward what he's given us. And the reason we're talking about this so much, the reason we're going through this series is because if we don't get this right, understanding both the stretching and the resting in the Lord, we won't get to the fullness of what God has for us as a church. We might try really hard. We might have some good push, a good start, all these things. But if we're not understanding how to have a healthy rhythm in this regard, we'll burn out, or conflicts will arise, or injuries will happen in the family or with kids or with brothers and sisters in Christ. The enemy will pick that apart. We have to both know how to go farther than we've ever been, as well as have healthy rhythms that we would actually be still, we would stop and we'd cease and allow the Lord to move in us and cultivate us and strengthen us and restore us on a regular basis. So I want to start with this story. I was in junior high. Growing up in Arizona, my parents had a cabin for a while up in northern Arizona. So it was up in the mountains, up in the forest. And there was this particular New Year's Eve where we invited some of our family friends up. They had kids our age, some of our closest friends. And my buddy Matt was part of that family. And as we were celebrating New Year's Eve, we decided, hey, we've never stayed up for 24 hours straight before. This is our shot. It would be so cool to be able to tell people we stayed up for 24 straight hours. So we did the math. Knew I had woken up at 7 o'clock or whenever it was that day, so I knew that we would have to get to 7 a.m. And so our families, we celebrate New Year's and the ball drops and everything. And then all the normal people went to bed, right? And then Matt and I are like, we're going for 7 a.m. It wasn't because anyone forced us to. There was no obligation. There really was, it really didn't matter for anything except that we wanted to do it. So we're pushing through and we're keeping each other awake. And then it starts, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock starts getting harder. 3:30, Matt bails. And he leaves me high and dry for the rest of the night. I'm like, Matt. So I'm like, I got to make it to 7. I got to do it, right? So then 5 o'clock is brutal. 6 o'clock is just agony. You hit that point of being lethargic, right? I'm just this junior high. I've never done this before. So by the time 7 o'clock happens, people are like all the normal people in our family were getting up and getting their coffee, and it's like this nice restful morning in the mountains, right? They're having this great time, and I'm just in agony, right? Finally make it to 7:01 or whatever it was, and I head straight downstairs. There was no joy in the fact that I had just accomplished this 24-hour challenge, right? I go and I crash downstairs. I wake up at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. All my friends are gone. The party's over, and I still just feel horrible. So I tell that story because sometimes I feel like we operate the same way in our lives, okay? If we really break it down, we realize sometimes we're pursuing things that really don't matter. If we're just being really brutally honest. No one's forcing us to. But for whatever reason, we're pursuing things. That could be social media, that could be movies, that could be all this stuff that isn't bad in and of itself, but we're pursuing all these things that no one's forcing us to, but it's literally sucking out all our time to the point that we get into a constant state of lethargy, being lethargic all the time, where then we're just trying to keep up with all the things that we've put on our plate. No one's forcing us to, but then it actually causes us to miss out on what's most valuable and important. Just like me trying to do some stupid challenge to stay up for 24 hours. But how often do we get into this rat race where we're just constantly going after the next thing? We're lethargic, but we just keep going because that's all we've become acclimated to. Today we're going to take a deeper dive into Sabbath. One more layer deeper. We're going to talk about 3 things in particular. 1 is the reason for Sabbath. 2 is the challenge of Sabbath. And 3 are the benefits of Sabbath. And there's very specific reasons that I've ordered them that way. We're going to start with the purpose, and then the challenges, and then the benefits. Later on in the series, we'll break down specifically some practical breakdowns of how we can Sabbath well. But we're going to start with these 3 things today. So turn to Colossians 1. We're going to start in verse 15. I believe that as we learn how to Sabbath well, not only will it change the way we live the other 6 days of the week, but I believe that if we Sabbath well, it's not just something we're trying to throw on our plate and load up on ourselves, another thing to do, but it actually will become one of the highlights of our week each week. If we're doing it well, it's not going to be a burden, it's actually going to be freedom. But as we talk about the reason for Sabbath, the purpose of Sabbath, I don't know how many people use this verse, but you could use this passage from Colossians in any sermon that has ever been preached, and it would be relevant. So let's read it together. Starting in verse 15. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together, and he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. That in everything he might be preeminent. All things are made through him and for him. He is the first and the last. That in everything he might be preeminent. So purpose of Sabbath, we don't just jump to the benefits for ourselves. I know there are some tangible benefits of what a Sabbath will do for us, but that's not where we should start. This week I was reading from a couple different authors. One is a Jewish rabbi on his concept of Sabbath, which is really interesting. Another is this woman who was Jewish and then came to know Jesus. And she was writing about the value and the depth of some of these things in Jewish culture and its relevancy to our walk with Christ. Both very interesting reads. But it's interesting to see that the context, the basis, the foundation of Sabbath isn't saying, okay, what can I get out of this? But it's going to the fact that he's preeminent. He's preeminent. He's first. He's first place of the throne of our heart. He's first place of our finances. He's first place of our time and our schedule. He takes first place. He is preeminent. Like a lot of things in our walk with Christ, it's not for what we get back. Yet what we do get in return will bless us. For instance, serving. In a place that God might call you to serve or be engaged in his kingdom, you don't do that for your name. You don't do that for recognition. You don't do that for your own gratification. You do it to resemble the image of Jesus as the ultimate servant. Yet will it bless you? Absolutely. Will you benefit from taking that humble stance of a servant? Absolutely. In ways that the world doesn't even understand. Same with giving. We don't give because we're like, hey, if I give, then God will put something back in my pocket. That's not the purpose. But will it bless us to be generous givers and cheerful givers? Absolutely. Absolutely. Same with just following Jesus in general. We don't follow Jesus for what he'll do for us. We don't follow Jesus for what we can get from him. But will we receive much? We'll receive everything by following Jesus. We'll be immensely blessed beyond what we could expect, not just in the way that the world measures blessing, but in the fact that we've gained everything through what we just remembered through his body and his blood, being made brand new and given new life, given a new name. So we don't follow him for what we can get from him, but it absolutely is in our best interest to follow him. So we don't Sabbath for what we can benefit from it, but it is absolutely in our best interest to put him first place, make him preeminent of our time and schedule. So this can be seen at both a daily rhythm, a weekly rhythm, even a yearly rhythm. A daily rhythm is, does he have preeminence? Does he get the first fruits of our day? Does he get the first fruits of those waking hours of our day? Or maybe our phone does. That's something I've changed recently is I turn my phone off and I keep it in the other room. I don't want my attention, my first attention to go and see all the things that have popped up on my phone. Does he get the first fruits? Do we honor him with that in our day in the secret place? Think of Sabbath as like the first fruits of our week in a way. On a weekly rhythm, does he have the first fruits of our week? Amidst all the things that we might have on our plate or have to do or whatever, does he have preeminence to say, hey, if I can't fit it in while still having a Sabbath, then I'm not going to fit it in. I'm not going to give Jesus the short end of the stick of my calendar. Because sometimes in a busy society like we live in, it can become easy to justify things. Well, we can't really be involved because Johnny has 27 baseball games this month. It sounds like Johnny needs to find a new hobby. I love baseball, and there's a way to do it well, and that's not it. But whatever it is, there could be good things, blessings, and incredible things on God's green earth, but if it takes the place or preeminence of Jesus, it needs to go. Because otherwise, what are we teaching, whether it's our kids, what are we teaching new believers, what are we showing the world when every time there's a conflict of schedule, Jesus gets the short end of the stick? I want us to be people that say, hey, Jesus gets first place. If something's got to go, it's going to have to come from somewhere else. Not because we're being legalistic or because we have to, but we stand in our conviction that we're here because of him. He is first place, the throne of our hearts. I believe even non-believers respect that. When we live with our yes being yes and our no being no, and living in conviction, not because of legalism or any of that, but saying, hey, this is why we're here. This is why I'm here. Jesus gets first place. I believe even non-believers respect the conviction of making your yes, yes, and your no, no. But a regular Sabbath, a regular moment of stopping and ceasing, giving him the first fruits of our week, it reminds us that we're not slaves to time or the world around us. God is outside of time. Yet sometimes we live enslaved to it. And I'm not saying that's warranted to just always blow off your word and not show up at places or whatever, but I'm saying don't live enslaved to the rhythm of the world around us. Set the rhythm of our life with Christ, with him first. He gets the first blocks on our schedule. Everything else, if it fits in, it fits in. That's great. Otherwise, we got some decisions to make of yeses and nos. Discovering with him what we're called to say yes to and what we're called to say no to. But it's that stepping into a supernatural economy of time as well. There's some incredible testimonies I've heard of God doing things in extraordinary time or much less time than they should have. There's this one particular theologian, I don't remember who it was that I read or heard. He said, if I only have 4 hours to do 6 hours worth of work, then I should probably start with 2 hours of prayer. What's he saying there? He's saying stepping out of this slavery of time and saying, hey, I got to walk in the supernatural. Because sometimes God very well puts things on our plate that are so far beyond us. I think there's a stewardship aspect of that where we just need to design our schedules appropriately. But there are also moments where it's like, God, there's no way this can happen. You've called me to this. You've put this on my plate, but this is beyond my physical strength. I need to step into your supernatural economy of time. The same way that we step into his supernatural economy of resources. He's not bound by either time or resources. Remember that the solution for a pathologically busy life is not more time, but learning how to steward and walk in a life submitted to the God who is beyond time. Number 2, the challenge of Sabbath. Let's turn to Hebrews 4:11. In this passage, the author of Hebrews is finishing a long thought or recollection of the Israelites in the wilderness. And we're not going to read it all. It's two chapters or so, chapters 3 and 4. But he's recollecting what went on with the Israelites in the wilderness, and this is towards the end where he's wrapping up this thought. Now, as he's been recollecting that first generation, he references that they never entered into the promised land. He recognizes that they were rebellious to God in the wilderness, and they ultimately died in the wilderness because of that rebellion. But it's interesting because he refers to the promised land as entering God's rest. He says the first generation didn't enter God's rest. I just find that interesting. The promised land being referred to as rest. So it says Hebrews 4:11. He's wrapping up this thought, and he says, "Let us therefore strive to enter that rest, so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience." Seems like kind of a funny phrase. Let us strive to enter rest. Let us strive to enter rest. What does he mean? Let's break it down. I believe that a lot of times people have a misconception of this concept of the Israelites coming out of Egypt, going into the wilderness, and going into the promised land. I think they misunderstand what picture is being painted through that Old Testament story. Some people think, well, Egypt must be bondage to slavery, so that's like pre-Christ. And promised land must be heaven. It's where we're waiting to go. The problem with that is that if we think the promised land is simply heaven and that we're just waiting to get to heaven, that'll cause us to just wander in the wilderness just like the Israelites. But if we recognize that the promised land does not start at heaven, yes, it's part of the inheritance, but the promised land is symbolic of our inheritance as believers and the establishment of God's kingdom on earth that requires us to pursue, that requires us to slay giants through the power of God, that requires us to go after something. It'll radically change how we walk as believers. Not just wandering in the wilderness, waiting for God to swoop us up and take us to heaven, but actually recognizing the promised land. The 40 years of wandering was because people were unwilling to step into what God had called for them, unwilling to step into the inheritance that he had for them. So we got to straighten that out when we're looking at the context of this author of Hebrews saying, let us therefore strive to enter his rest. Let us therefore strive to enter the promised land is what he's referring to. But there's different contexts of work. And we see this scripturally. If he's saying we're striving after something, there's good work and there's bad work, you could say. Good work we see in the garden. Genesis 2:15. God made the heavens and the earth. He made all the plants and animals. He made the garden, all the rivers and streams and everything, the oceans. And then in Genesis 2:15, it says that God placed Adam in the garden. Different translations say different things, but ESV says to work it and to keep it. King James says to dress it and to keep it. New King James says to tend and keep. Or NASB, cultivate and keep. Or NIV, work it and take care of it. The point is that there was work in the garden. Work is not the enemy. There is a healthy form of work that is actually worship to the Lord. Where the work of our hands is actually exalting him because we're walking in what he made us for or what he called us to in this season. Good and healthy work that we see before the fall. Now, after the fall, a lot changes. After the fall, in Genesis 3:17, when the curse of sin essentially is set in, it says about Adam, cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat it all the days of your life. That's an ESV. In pain you shall eat of it. In King James it says, in sorrow you shall eat of it. In New King James it says, in toil you shall eat of it. In NIV it says, through painful toil you shall eat of it. This is a different type of work. You could say there was work in the garden and it was good and it was wholesome, purposeful, healthy work. When the curse of sin set in, that's when toil set in. There's a difference between those two. Healthy work can be restful and fulfilling even amidst the physical stretching or the emotional stretching. Just like the story that I told before coming to Washington, I asked the Lord, God, what kind of season are you bringing me into in Washington? He said, I'm bringing you into a season of rest, a deep rest, that if I'm walking in the flow of what the Spirit of God is doing, then amidst the stretching and amidst the ways that he's taking me farther than before, there'll be a deep rest. That'll be how I recognize that I'm in the flow of what he's doing, a deep rest. When we're healthfully working unto the Lord, there can be that deep rest even amidst the physical challenge or emotional challenge of where he's taking us. Toil is just painful. It's in our own strength. It's just purely trying to make something happen. We've stepped out of the heart posture of our work being in the purpose of God for his glory into the toil that comes from the curse of sin, where we're now living under slavery, so to speak, of sin. But thankfully, because of Jesus, he broke every bond of slavery so that we could enter back into what is healthy work, like just in the garden, where we're tending the garden. We're cultivating the garden that he's placed us in. But those are two very different things. We're not just called to cruise by until heaven. There's work to be done. Jesus came as a man. We've talked about it before. That must have been incredibly comfortable going from the God who had no bounds and was not bound by time, and yet stepping into human flesh. He came as a man. He was a carpenter. I'm sure he did hard work. I bet he loved it. Some of you who are watching The Chosen, I think, does a good, interesting way of portraying the nature of Jesus walking in human flesh. We read in Scripture that there were times where he was ministering to the multitudes and that he healed all their sick. It literally says, healed all their sick. Could you imagine how many people were coming to Jesus to get healed? Imagine how long those days were, or emotionally draining that might have been. In The Chosen, they depict this. I remember one particular scene, Jesus is coming back from ministering to the multitudes, and it literally shows him like tired, worn out, like he's physically tired, but he was doing everything that he saw the Father doing, and so you could imagine he was living in the rest, the constant rest of abiding in his Father and co-laboring with his Father. There's a difference between healthy work and toil. But imagine when we talk about the fields are white with harvest, harvest is a lot of work. Harvest is a lot of work. You don't go and hang out with someone who's harvesting and just sit on the couch all day. When we're called to be part of the harvest, Jesus is like, hey, there's work to be done. Good work, not toil, not self-striving, not in our own strength, but there's work to be done. And it's a beautiful thing when we step into the work that God has given us, the garden he's given us to cultivate. It's an awesome thing, but it's different than toil. So the author of Hebrews is saying, strive to enter that rest. I mentioned a quote from Dallas Willard last week where he said, hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Now, he's not saying to go and be ruthless with people, but he's saying we ruthlessly have to go after the process of guarding our time, guarding our schedule. Because if we're just lackadaisical about it, if we're just casual about it, our schedule will get pulled in every direction. We have to ruthlessly look to how we can eliminate hurry in our life. We have to be tenacious with it. Tenacious with it. It takes work to Sabbath, to cease, to make time for the secret place on a daily basis, to make time to have a Sabbath on a weekly basis, to take time to get away and just step out of all the busyness of everyday life, go on a vacation. It takes time and work in order to do those things. There are challenges that come up. Imagine how many different ways, we all know it, how many different ways the enemy tries to disrupt these normal rhythms. How many random things can happen that could give you reason, even justifiable reason, to skip over your time in the secret place? How many justifiable reasons the enemy could stir up to say, oh, you can't really take a Sabbath this week, or that's not really feasible, that's not even possible. But is it? If Jesus has commanded us to do it, I think there's a way. Whether it's now or thousands of years ago when he first gave the command. But this is what it is, to go in and strive to enter his rest, to enter the promised land, to step into the inheritance that God has set aside for us. It will mean that there's work to do. It will mean that there might be some things we have to let go of. Things that we have to loose our grip from. It might mean that in order to take a Sabbath on a regular basis, that we have to be proactive. It might be that we have to do chores at a different time. Wednesday night randomly has become a chore night to make room for us to Sabbath. Because you could say, well, I could do that on my weekend. Well, what if we just had a later night and we did our chores so that we could actually have a restful Sabbath with family, with friends, or whatever it might be? It might mean that we have to be proactive and plan some things ahead, move some things around to make time. You might have to set some hard boundaries. For me, I mentioned this last week, there's a point where I really wasn't happy with how much time I was spending on social media and YouTube. And there were kind of general ways that I tried to cut back on it or set timers on my phone or whatever. But it just seemed like it always would creep back in. To use Dallas Willard's analogy, I wasn't being ruthless enough with setting boundaries. So finally, I figured out a way to lock all that, YouTube, social media, all this stuff, so that I can only actually pull it up on my phone if Sierra puts in a code. So if something happens to Sierra, you'll never see me on social media again. That'll be it. But I had to be a little more ruthless, and now, oh man, when you get off social media, I gotta be honest, it's like, you like detox for a second, but then once you're off it, you're like, why would I ever give time to that? If I'm just being completely honest, I'm like, man, there's nothing that I don't actually glean. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of really funny dog videos, I will give you that. But nothing of value. Again, going back to the story I put at the beginning, how much is our minds consumed with all the things that we're filling it with that we just become so accustomed to? The dopamine in our brain is literally accustomed to the hits of dopamine that we get over and over on social media or YouTube that aren't of any value anyways. But sometimes it requires us to set hard boundaries and just say, hey, we're not going to schedule things on this day or this time or on our calendar. It's off limits. Not to say that there aren't outliers and things that happen for sure, but like having hard boundaries. I took my work email off my phone. I would recommend it to anyone that works anywhere. It's been monumental for me. Instead of my brain being pulled in 100 different directions every time an email comes in or notification for something, I changed all the notifications on my phone. Now I have specific times where I do emails and text and things. I would have never imagined how much it frees up just on my mental capacity throughout a day. It's incredible. But sometimes boundaries have to be taken. Another thing that Sierra and I did this year, for a while after getting married, we were watching lots of movies. And at the beginning of the year, we decided, hey, we're going to have one movie night a week. And I asked Sierra, I was like, because we're both on board, but I said, now we have to clarify, is it one movie a week or one movie night a week? And that's a really important question for us. Because this is the thing, when we come back from a busy day, let's say it's 8:30, we're done with everything, whatever, and we go to turn on a movie at 8:30, Sierra will last about 37 minutes. So we had to distinguish, is it one movie a week or one movie night? She said one movie night. So I said, okay, so it means one movie every 3 weeks is basically what we're on. That's how it's going to pan out. But it's great. And so we find other life-giving things to do the other nights of the week. And movies are great. There are plenty of incredible, inspiring movies. It's awesome. And we get to watch 37 minutes of it each week. But this is how it plays out. When we begin getting a little more ruthless with how we guard our time, then it allows us to be more present and engaged in different, more life-giving ways. So I'm a numbers guy. Here are my numbers. I've been reading more in the last 6 months than I've ever read in my life. And some of that is because of these things. Since Christmas, I've read 6 or 7 books. And in my opinion, the best book is about 200 pages. Most people that have a novel thought or revelation can explain it in 200 words. You ever read a book and you're like 400 pages deep and you're like, man, I understood where you were going by like page 75. You didn't have to write 450 words. But so if you take that, a 200-page book for the average reader is about 4 hours of reading. And I had this epiphany. It might sound stupid to those who have already had this epiphany, but I had this epiphany. Man, people have contended for things for years or even decades that they put in a book. Where if you invest for 4 hours to glean what they've learned in decades, how much more valuable could that be than scrolling down a social media feed that you're going to forget tomorrow? I'm not saying it has to be reading. I'm just saying I've read more than I ever have in my life. And what a blessing it is to be able to glean from other people's impartation, their gifting, their experiences. But it's simply changing what time is going to. I don't necessarily have a ton of time. I'm getting more time as I'm growing in this. But for 4 hours per book, that means across 7 books, that's 28 hours of investment. It's been 37 days. I'm a numbers guy. It's been 37 days since Christmas. So it's talking like 45 minutes a day reading outside of what I read in the Bible. I was on social media a lot longer than 45 minutes a day. And yet the amount that I've been able to glean and grow and the way that has shaped how I think is the way that I shaped how I lead and different things. That's one simple way that time can be redeemed for something much more valuable than what we often give our time and attention to. And since I was spending more than 45 minutes a day on YouTube or social media or movies or whatever, that means I have even more time to sow into my marriage or to friends or be present in the moments or engagements that I have. So as we wrap up, number 3, the benefits of Sabbath. Let's go real quickly to Ecclesiastes 10:10. It says, if the iron is blunt and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength, but wisdom helps one succeed. We're talking about axes. When the axe is dull, then when we go to cut a tree down, it's going to take significantly more strength to do so. But if we operate in wisdom, like is being said here in this verse, and we sharpen the head of the axe first, it'll monumentally change the amount of strength needed to fall that tree. So again, we didn't start today with the benefits of Sabbath because that's not the point. The point is Him. But there are very deep and valuable benefits of Sabbathing well. I've found in my own life, by learning how to better steward my time, how to cut out things that are not of value or just taking up space like social media and all the things, I find that my mind and my spirit is so much more clear. So much more clear. I find that I walk in so much more peace, both emotionally and spiritually, so much more peace by having healthier rhythms of what I allow in or not, or how I use my time, giving God preeminence over my time. I found that it makes me more effective at the things that I actually do. Instead of rushing to the next thing and barely getting by, I find that I actually am able to get more done in less time. Imagine that. Being clear-minded and aligned with the Spirit and pressing into what God's got for me, not being distracted by a million other things. I find that I'm more engaged and present with people around me. There's more overflow. I was thinking this morning, I think I actually smile more. In situations where I might normally be stressed or have a lot on my mind or kind of rush into the next thing, I actually just enjoy the present with people, and I think I smile more in moments that would have otherwise been a lot going on in my mind or stressful. I find that it makes me a better leader. It makes decision-making easier. It's grown my walk with the Lord. It's grown my walk with my wife. It's grown my walk with people around me. There are incredible benefits to honoring what the Lord has called us to live in that rhythm of both a daily ceasing, secret place, a weekly Sabbath, and so forth. So I'm going to close with this. 1 month from today, Sunday, March 1st, we're going to do what we're calling the Sabbath Challenge. We talked a few weeks ago about how when Jesus taught, He modeled, He did life with people. How often, and I'm guilty of this as well, how often do we preach from the pulpit but not actually practice things together? So as we're learning, and there's still a couple more sermons in this series, but as we're learning to Sabbath well, we're actually going to practice it together. And so this is how it's going to look. On Saturday, February 28th at 6 p.m., if you choose to take the Sabbath challenge, do whatever you need to do in order to be able to turn your phone off at 6 p.m. on Saturday night. Turn it off. That night, Saturday, have a meal with your family or with friends. Have a meaningful, intentional meal around the dinner table. Set time aside to go deep with people, to have deeper conversations, to visit with one another. Again, like we read in Exodus, Sabbath can involve the visitors in your home, your kids, your family. So have an intentional meal that Saturday night with everyone's phones off. Then on Sunday, church is going to be a little bit different than normal. At 9 a.m. service, this is only for March 1st. 9 a.m. service, this room is actually going to be an open prayer room. There's going to be music in the background, but there's not going to be a traditional service. but we're inviting people to come and spend time in the secret place together. I don't know if you've ever done that before. I've done it, and it's incredibly powerful when you're in a room of people, when we're in the living room together, so to speak, and each one is having their secret time with the Lord. Nobody's preaching, there's not a service, but we're simply entering into the secret place together. Incredibly powerful. Then at the 11 o'clock service, there'll be a normal service. We'll have worship, we'll have preaching, we'll have kids' church, all the stuff. Everybody will be together in one service, 11 a.m. And then after service, there's going to be lunch downstairs. This was already planned even before we decided to do this challenge, but the Brazil missions team is providing lunch. It's free. You don't have to get tickets, but it's by donation. If you feel led, make a donation to the Brazil team. You don't have to give anything. Just come. But we're going to have lunch together, and then the church is going to remain open until 4 or 5 o'clock. We're up here is going to be a quiet space if you want to take more quiet space with the Lord. Downstairs, there'll be fellowship. We'll get some games out. We're just going to enjoy a restful afternoon as a church family. It'll be really simple. But we're literally going to practice Sabbath together. Sabbath can look 100 different ways. We're going to continue to unpack that in the series. But like I said, if we learn to Sabbath well, it will become one of the highlights of our week, and it will radically transform the way we live the other 6 days of the week. It's radically transformed me personally. So all the information for that Sabbath challenge is on the events page. You can find that information. But I encourage you to set that time aside, block it off on your schedule, and do the Sabbath challenge with us. Go ahead and stand with me. Let's pray. God, we thank you that you know us so well. You created us. You know us better than anyone on this earth does. And I thank you that you're so good to give us your word that teaches us how to walk in life, abundant life that you paid for. God, we want to step out of that pathological busyness. We don't want to be dictated by all the things around us, but we want to truly live with you being preeminent over everything in our life, including our schedule, including our time. So even as we continue to dive deeper in this series, would you teach us and reveal? Would you even give creative ideas of ways that we in our own context and family can Sabbath well? Because you're worth it. You're worth having a holiday every week. A day set aside and holy, that together with our friends and family, we could live in your rest on a weekly basis, giving you the first fruits of our time. Bless each one in this room in this week. In Jesus' name, amen.